Act, our Arrowsmith Amateur Radio Club of Port Alberni to come and speak to us, to show you what we do as members of the club and a little bit of the history. And I brought in our little gadget that we use when we go someplace walking around and you're away from home. We got a repeater up Mount Arrowsmith, and it's in communication 24 hours a day. And when you need help sometime, you can call somebody, and that's up to the mountain. Answering my, I don't want to take from hell, but I try to show you how I can carry this, and where there is a Wi-Fi connection or through your telephone, which would be expensive. So Wi-Fi, and you can call any radio amateur in the world through the little iPad here. You can see a little list here of the links. There is links, repeaters, all sorts of things. I can listen to the space station. You're not allowed to talk to them because they have other things to do, but that's what radio club, it's radio club, radio amateurs can do. Looks like it's a hobby, and it's a very important hobby for the rest of the world. So without any more ado, I invite my speaker here today, Winney. He's the treasurer of the local amateur radio club, and he's been a radio amateur for a long time. Al, will you please take over?
Being an older fellow, I need notes. Back in the, I want to thank Joe for inviting me, as well as the rest of you. Back in the 60s, there was a chap in town named Les Hammer, and he started teaching some of the local fellas about amateur radio, the hobby. And lo and behold, he ended up getting quite a crowd, so we ended up with starting up a club. The club, Arrowsmith Amateur Radio Club, it ended up being created about 1972. At the time, there was Les and maybe a half a dozen other amateurs, and over the years it grew and grew, and the number of amateurs in the city, in the valley rather, grew exponentially. We have approximately 134 licensed amateurs in the valley here, although a lot of them had families, and of course the hobby sort of gets marshaled off to the sidelines. So the club started with one repeater, and it was under the call sign of VE7RAC, and it was located actually on 3rd Avenue, just around near where Barlow's used to be. Over the more longer time frame, we ended up with finding a site up on Mount Arrowsmith, and we ended up moving it up there. And of course now, such as the little handheld that Joe has, we can talk all the way to Sayward on a portable. You can be standing on the beach near Sayward and talk back to here, or even talk to another amateur over in Vancouver. And that's what the repeater's for. The club presently has 4 repeaters. We have 2 up on Mount Arrowsmith, a VHF and a UHF. The UHF connects to another repeater that's out on Mount Ozart, overshadowing, in its shadow is Ucluelet and Tofino. It also gives us a fairly good coverage of the West Coast Trail as well. Presently, we have about 35 dedicated members in the club, and we have the 4 repeaters entirely. The early 80s, we took on the job of providing the Alberni-Clackawas Regional District with backup communications. It involves when the ground shakes and a tsunami hits, these lovely little things we call smartphones, they cease to work, along with the power and the landlines. Well, amateur radio doesn't. Most of us have handhelds, more radios in our vehicles. We have backup for our radios at home. So we're able to keep on communicating, and we don't just communicate locally. We can talk with Victoria as far away as the space station as well. We've even talked to Mr. Hatfield while he was up going around the planet. Good Canadian. 2014, we upgraded our 2 repeaters on Mount Arrowsmith through a grant from the regional district. We brought them up to a little bit more modern. They are actually Daniels repeaters, and they're a Canadian invention. They're built in Victoria, and they're the Cadillac of remote mountaintop repeaters. They also have a huge footprint, but they also have a huge price tag because they are the best, and they have some of them down in Antarctica, and they've been sitting there for years, plugging away. They have to run down in the spring and change the batteries because it's total dark, but some in the winter. We also changed out 2 of our repeaters, the low-level ones. We have 2, as I was saying, we have 2 up on Mount Arrowsmith. We have another one out on Ozark, and we have a low-level one over at the Beaver Creek water reservoir. That one is connected to what we call the island trunk system. It allows us to talk up and down the island completely on a handheld. Kind of interesting. In 2015, through a grant, again, from the regional district, we acquired a trailer and we outfitted it with all the types of communications that would be needed in the valley in the event of an emergency, a disaster, or a bad storm like we may have Saturday. And I have it here for show and tell for anybody who wishes to take a look at it inside, get an impression of what it's like. My mobile is here as well. I'm pulling the trailer, and a lot of our other members have very similar outfits in their vehicles as well. The amateur radio role over the years has changed. We used to be a hobby, but now a lot of the governments, both federal and provincial, now have figured out that we can provide a service which doesn't cost them anything. Where else could they get a fully trained group of radio techs, radio operators who have their own equipment? Amateur radio. Or we've also, you've likely heard of amateur radio in all the disasters. You'll find them sort of in the background. They'll be providing the communications. Our ECOM trailer, we now have the emergency communications trailer, or ECOM is what we call it. We also have a sister trailer. It's called the tower trailer, or the pony as some of us call it. It has a 38-foot electrical raising antenna tower on it. We pull it up, set out the arms to hit a button, it moves it up, and then it shoots up in the air, and we have antennas that we put on it. Is there any questions that anyone would like to know?
I've got a question. Is there any dead zones with your phones?
Oh, yes. There's, no matter what you have, you know that commercial on TV, can you hear me now? Well, that's with us too. The old saying goes, is if you can't hear me very well, move 10 feet and then try again. And 90% of the time that works.
So if you're in the dense forest and stuff like that, where the canopy is overhanging you, any issues?
Not really. Remember, the only thing that stops radio waves is metal. Now, if you were in a city, you would have problems there because skyscrapers have a tendency to shadow radio waves because there's a lot of metal in them. Trees, as a rule, the only time trees will affect it is if you're on what we call UHF or higher frequencies, such as our cell phones. Now, those you can have issues where it will block, areas.
What about satellite phones? They're relative, what do you think of them?
You want an honest opinion?
Yeah.
To us, they're junk. Because it's simple. We had one during the exercise over here, and it was more of an inconvenience and troublesome than it was anything. There's actually 3 types of phones available in Canada. One of them, I won't say the name, but if you want to know, they ask me afterwards. They're junk. You'd be lucky if you can get it to work. And it won't be, can you hear me now? And it move 10 feet either.
Yeah. What about the other 2?
They normally work good, within reason. The one we had at the exercise, it had 2 modes on it. It had like a radio mode where you could break in and talk to if you heard the person on there, and it also acted like a telephone where you actually dialed a number on it. That particular one it worked good. It was on loan from us from Fraser University. So theirs, mind you, I'm not sure. I think they've kind of tweaked it up a bit, so it performed really well. Anyone else? Go.
Al, can you tell a story or two, if you remember, what radio amateurs done communicating when somebody was lost or something happened?
Well, the biggest problem with a lot of emergencies is communications. Without it, you're kind of lost. Other than sending somebody, having a runner go out, you have to have the communications there. In the event of, say, such as somebody is lost, well then search and rescue goes out and they try to find the person and they have their trackers and everything. We provide a backup service to them for what we do is we can actually track their teams, and it's displayed on an electronic map, and it gives their command an idea of where their teams are. We're not totally at that point where we can say, okay, you have radio for every one of them, but we're working on that part of it. It takes a lot of people, and you were talking about the canopy of the forest. If you're using UHF radio, depending where you get on the island here, where there's a lot of iron ore, that will have a big effect on the radios.
Can I, what I wanted to tell you is that I'll tell you my own little useful day in handheld world. We were camping at Little Qualicum Falls a few years back, and we were having, picnic up there, and here comes this young fella, all excited, say, we need help because one of our friends cannot come up from the river. They had gone swimming the lower bridge, and he had become so hypothermic that he didn't have strength to climb to come out. So I said, what we do? We had cell phones, didn't work. So I had my little radio, and I said, what do I do now? First idea is call for Alberni, call repeater, say, is anybody on frequency that can help? Ted Batsula came on, and I said, Ted, can you call the Parksville radio, the rescue people, that they can come here and help because they're the closest. In the meantime, I said, has anybody got a rope in the truck or somewhere? And one of us had a rope in the truck, luckily. So they threw the rope to the fellow, and by the time the rescue came up, he was out of the water already. So that gives you an idea. what a little radio can do sometimes. The other funny part of radio is when somebody was lost in the hills here, and the canopy sometimes works a strange way with radio waves. So the people that were looking for whatever, they could get in touch with people in somewhere in Arizona. They couldn't contact the locals, but they could contact this amateur way far away. And this amateur far away contacted somebody in town and relayed the message. So that gives you an idea what the radio waves do.
One question, the radio phone, how much are they?
The amateur versions, they run anything from about $300 up. Some of us use commercial, such as this one here. These can run all up to $1,000 or better. But it depends on what you want it to do. So this particular one is also licensed commercially because the club has now taken on Emergency Management BC's frequencies, and we've coordinated those all into our systems. So in order to put commercial frequencies, you have to have a commercial radio. But we can put amateur frequencies on the commercial, but you can't go the reverse on an amateur radio. All to do with, what was I heard the term, politics or bureaucrats.
Al, can you mention the trailer out here?
Yes, I brought along the trailer for show and tell. If you'd like to wander outside, we can take a look at it. Thank you.
Well, so on behalf of the club, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. I have a bit of an interest that I belong to the Alberni Valley Hill Climbers, and we're out in the woods a lot, and it's amazing how quickly you can get lost out there with all these different arteries on it. So it's reassuring if I had a radio that I could call somebody so I can get home safely.
You gotta come to my course.
Anyway, on behalf of the club, thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.